Princess Illyria of the Zalvian Empire stood motionless before the mirror, scrutinizing her newly adapted form. The cellular reconstruction had been flawless, pink-tinged skin replacing her natural azure hue, 5 fingers instead of 7, and those peculiar rounded ears. Only her eyes remained somewhat familiar, though their natural violet luminescence had been dulled to a more acceptable human shade of deep purple. Satisfactory, she murmured to herself, the unfamiliar vocal patterns of Earth English still feeling strange in her throat. 6 months of intensive study had prepared her linguistically, but experiencing this primitive planet firsthand was another matter entirely. Her mission parameters were clear: infiltrate, investigate weaknesses, and prepare for the arrival of the Zalvian Armada in 90 Earth days. Supreme Commander Dravik had personally selected her for this assignment, not because she was fourth in line to the imperial throne, but because she was the Empire's most ruthless tactical prodigy. Sentimentality is weakness, she reminded herself, reciting the first lesson of the imperial doctrine. Humans were notorious throughout the galaxy for their emotional instability. Such vulnerability made them perfect for conquest. Illyria stepped out of her cloaked pod, which had landed in a secluded forest outside the mid-sized human settlement they called Boulder. According to intelligence, a science fiction convention was occurring this weekend, the perfect cover to observe human behavior while any unusual mannerisms on her part would be attributed to staying in character. The convention center buzzed with activity that assaulted her senses. Humans packed together without proper distancing protocols, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of excitement. Many wore crude approximations of alien species, some amusingly close to actual civilizations the humans had no knowledge of. "Whoa, your costume is incredible." A deep male voice broke through her observations. "The detail work is insane. Did you make it yourself?" She turned to face a human male with tousled dark hair and a strong jawline. His broad shoulders filled out a simple black t-shirt, and he carried a portfolio under one muscular arm. Most striking was his confident smile, warm yet mischievous. "I am not wearing a costume," Illyria replied stiffly. The man laughed, the sound rich and resonant. "Right, sorry. You're not wearing a costume, you are an alien." "Got it. Method acting. Respect." He extended a large hand. "I'm Julian Reeves. Comic artist, occasional convention panelist, full-time caffeine addict." Illyria stared at his hand, momentarily forgetting the briefing on human greetings. After an awkward pause, she grasped it firmly, noting the calloused fingertips, evidence of his artistic profession, and unexpected warmth. "I am Illyria." Using her real name was tactical error number 1. But something about this human's direct gaze had disrupted her prepared alias. "Just Illyria? Like Madonna or Cher?" His smile widened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "Very alien. I dig it." Julian's easy manner was nothing like the deferential treatment she received as royalty. It was refreshing. "Are you familiar with extraterrestrial species classifications?" she asked, testing his knowledge. He ran a hand through his dark hair and laughed again, a sound unexpectedly pleasant to her ears. "Only the ones I create. I write a graphic novel series about interstellar diplomacy gone wrong. Actually, I'm doing a panel on it in an hour. You should come, you've got the alien princess vibe down perfectly." Illyria felt an unfamiliar sensation in her chest, a fluttering that imperial medical training had never covered. "Perhaps I will." "Great." Julian's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Let me buy you a coffee first. Consider it payment for the inspiration. Your makeup is giving me ideas for a new character." Coffee. A stimulant humans were strangely obsessed with. An excellent opportunity for cultural observation. "That would be acceptable," she replied. As Julian led her toward the convention cafe, his tall frame easily creating a path through the crowd, Illyria reminded herself this was merely reconnaissance. Yet for the first time since landing on Earth, the thought of her mission brought no satisfaction, only a strange, unsettling doubt that she immediately tried to suppress. 90 days until the Armada arrived. 90 days to understand human weaknesses. She hadn't anticipated that the first weakness she'd discover might be her own. 2 weeks into her mission, and Princess Illyria found herself in Julian's studio apartment for the third time, ostensibly researching authentic human habitats. At least, that's what she'd report to Commander Dravik during their next scheduled communication. The truth was far more disturbing. She enjoyed being here. Julian's workspace was organized chaos, sketches pinned to every wall, half-finished illustrations scattered across his drafting table, and reference books stacked in precarious towers. Currently, he stood at his easel, brow furrowed in concentration as he worked on a new comic panel. "You're staring again," he said without looking up, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I am observing your technique," she replied, quickly averting her gaze from the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders as he leaned forward. "Sure you are." He set down his brush and turned to face her, leaning against the table with arms crossed. "You know, for someone researching a paper on contemporary creative professions, you're awfully interested in my face." Illyria felt heat rising to her cheeks, an involuntary human response she'd been unable to suppress since her transformation. "Your facial structure is unique." Julian laughed. "That's either the worst insult or the strangest compliment I've ever received." She watched as he crossed the room and sat beside her on the worn sofa. His proximity triggered an alarming increase in her heart rate. "So, mysterious Illyria with no last name," he said, his voice softer now. "When are you going to drop the act and tell me what you're really doing in Boulder?" For a terrifying moment, she thought he'd discovered her true identity. But his expression held only gentle curiosity, not suspicion. "What makes you think I am not being truthful?" she asked carefully. Julian's smile turned thoughtful. "Well, for starters, nobody takes 3 weeks to research one article. And you ask questions like you've never experienced basic human stuff before. Last week you stared at my toaster for 5 minutes like it was alien technology. Your bread heating device is inefficient," she stated defensively. "See? That right there." He gestured toward her. "Normal people don't call it a bread heating device. They say toaster." He leaned closer, his eyes searching hers. "It's like you're from another planet." The irony nearly made her laugh, a sensation she was experiencing with increasing frequency in his presence. "Dangerous." "I assure you, I was born on Earth," she lied smoothly. "I simply had an unusual childhood." "I'll bet," Julian murmured. His hand moved to brush a strand of hair from her face, and Illyria froze at the contact. His fingers lingered near her cheek. "Your eyes are incredible. I've never seen that shade of purple before." She should move away. She should manufacture an excuse to leave. Instead, she remained perfectly still, studying the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "They are a genetic anomaly," she managed to say. "They're beautiful," he countered. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility, until Julian's phone chimed loudly. He reluctantly pulled away to check it. "Damn, I need to finish these pages before tomorrow." He gave her an apologetic look. "Publisher's deadline. Rain check on dinner?" Illyria nodded, simultaneously relieved and disappointed. She needed time to recalibrate her emotional responses. This mission was becoming dangerously compromised. As Julian returned to his work, Illyria's communicator vibrated silently against her skin. The subdermal implant was signaling an incoming transmission from the fleet, one that couldn't wait until her scheduled report. "I should go," she announced abruptly. "I have research to compile." Julian looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "Oh, okay. I'll walk you." "No need." She gathered her things quickly. "Continue your work. I can find my way." Outside his apartment, Illyria hurried to a secluded area of the nearby park. Night had fallen, providing adequate cover as she activated her communicator. Commander Dravok's holographic form materialized before her, his expression severe. "Princess, your reports have been increasingly infrequent and lacking in tactical value," he stated without preamble. "The High Council questions your commitment to this mission." "My commitment is unwavering," she responded automatically, though the words felt hollow. "I am gathering intelligence on their social structures and defenses. Time grows short. The Emperor has accelerated our timeline. The Armada will arrive in 45 days, not 90. Illyria felt a cold shock run through her. "That is, unexpectedly soon. Is that disappointment I detect, Princess?" Dravok's eyes narrowed. "Remember your training. Remember your purpose. You were bred for conquest, not companionship." The commander's image flickered. "Your next report will include strategic targets and defense weaknesses, or we will extract you and send someone with more dedication." As his hologram disappeared, Illyria found herself staring at the distant lights of the city, at Julian's building among them. 45 days. The knowledge settled in her chest like a stone. For the first time in her life, Princess Illyria of the Zalvian Empire dreaded victory. "You've been avoiding me," Julian said, leaning against the doorframe of his apartment. His expression was a mixture of concern and hurt as he studied Illyria's face. 1 week had passed since Commander Dravok's transmission. 1 week of Illyria making excuses, keeping her distance, and attempting to focus on her mission. Yet here she stood at Julian's door, her resolve crumbling. "I've been busy," she replied, the human idiom feeling awkward on her tongue. "Too busy for coffee? Too busy to return my calls?" He stepped aside to let her in. "I was starting to think I imagined that moment between us." Illyria entered hesitantly. This was a tactical error. She should be identifying military targets, not standing in this human's living space feeling her pulse accelerate at his proximity. "I brought you something," Julian said, breaking the tense silence. He walked to his drafting table and picked up a portfolio. "The first draft of my new character. Inspired by you." He handed her several illustrated pages. The character was unmistakably based on her, but not her human disguise. Somehow, Julian had created a being with swirling azure skin, elongated features, and glowing violet eyes. The resemblance to her true Zalvian form was disturbingly accurate. "How did you?" she whispered, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the artwork. Julian shrugged. "Just my imagination. Something about you feels otherworldly. I tried to capture that." He watched her reaction closely. "You don't like it?" "No, it's remarkable. Too remarkable." Had her camouflage faltered somehow? Had he seen her true form? Impossible. "I'm calling her Princess Seraphine of the Astral Empire," Julian continued, moving to stand behind her. "A royal heir sent to Earth as a spy, but she falls in love with." The portfolio slipped from Illyria's hands, pages scattering across the floor. "How do you know this?" she demanded, turning to face him. Julian's eyes widened at her intensity. "Know what?" "Illyria, it's just a story I'm creating." She forced herself to calm. "Of course. I apologize for overreacting." As she knelt to gather the fallen pages, a sharp pain shot through her temple, her communicator activating unexpectedly. She gasped, pressing her hand to her head. "Hey, are you okay?" Julian reached for her arm, concerned. "I need to use your bathroom," she managed, hurrying down the hallway. Once alone, she activated her communicator to silent mode, but not before a series of Zalvian numerals had projected briefly from her palm, tactical coordinates for the first wave of the invasion. Taking a moment to compose herself, Illyria returned to find Julian standing frozen in the living room, holding something small and metallic, her molecular compressor, which must have fallen from her pocket during her abrupt movement. "What is this?" he asked quietly, turning the device over in his hands. The compressor's crystal core pulsed with energy, responding to his touch by projecting a three-dimensional map of Boulder with several locations marked in pulsing red. Illyria lunged forward. "Don't touch that." But it was too late. Julian's eyes moved from the projection to her face, comprehension dawning. "This isn't a toy or a prop, is it?" His voice was steady despite the shock evident in his expression. "Those pages I drew. I was right, wasn't I?" Protocol dictated immediate elimination of any human who discovered her identity. Commander Dravek's training echoed in her mind, no witnesses. No mercy. No exceptions. Her hand moved to the neural disruptor concealed at her waist. One pulse, and Julian would forget everything, if he survived the process. "Who are you, Illyria?" he asked softly. "What are you?" She could feel her human disguise wavering under emotional stress, her natural bioluminescence threatening to show through her artificial skin. The smart tactical choice was clear. "Your artwork was correct," she said instead, her voice barely audible. "I am Princess Illyria of the Zalvian Empire. I was sent here to prepare for invasion." She expected fear, anger, perhaps even violence. Instead, Julian set the device carefully on the table and approached her slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. "Show me," he said. "Show me who you really are." Illyria hesitated, then pressed the sequence on her wrist device that would temporarily disable her molecular disguise. Her skin rippled, the human pigmentation fading to reveal her natural azure coloring with its subtle iridescent patterns. Her fingers elongated, revealing their true 7-digit form. Her eyes brightened to their natural violet luminescence. Julian's breath caught, but he didn't step back. Instead, he moved closer, wonder replacing shock in his expression. "You're beautiful," he whispered. His hand reached up, hesitating just shy of touching her face, asking permission without words. When she didn't pull away, his fingers gently traced the luminescent markings along her cheekbone. "I don't understand," she said, confusion overwhelming her training. "You should be afraid. You should be calling your authorities." Julian's mouth curved into that same warm smile that had first disrupted her mission. "Probably. But I've been falling in love with you for weeks." His voice was steady despite the enormity of his confession. "Finding out you're an alien princess doesn't change that. It just explains why you're so fascinated by toasters." A laugh escaped her, a sound so foreign to her military training that it startled her. This was not how first contact scenarios were supposed to unfold. "My people will arrive in 38 days, she said, forcing herself to speak the truth he needed to hear. "They will not come in peace." Julian's smile faded, but the tenderness in his eyes remained. "Then we have 38 days to change your mind about humanity." His hand found hers, their different numbers of fingers intertwining. "Starting now." Illyria knew she should pull away, but for the first time in her life, duty felt less compelling than desire. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings while her heart, an organ her people considered merely physiological, urged her towards something her tactical training had never prepared her for. Surrender. Tactical assessment required, Princess Illyria. Designate primary targets for the first strike. Commander Dravek's holographic form paced before her in the small clearing where she conducted her communications, safely away from human surveillance. Dawn was breaking over Boulder, bathing the mountains in soft golden light. "The humans have orbital defense systems that must be neutralized first," she lied smoothly. "Their technology is more advanced than our initial intelligence suggested." It was her third fabricated report in 2 weeks. Since revealing herself to Julian, Illyria had been systematically sabotaging her own mission, sending misleading information, suggesting non-existent defense capabilities, and delaying the tactical assessments that would guide the invasion. The High Council grows impatient with these delays, Dravek's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You were chosen for your ruthless efficiency, yet you speak of caution? Of delay? Illyria maintained her royal bearing, face impassive despite the turmoil within. I speak of victory, Commander. Underestimating these humans would be a strategic error. Perhaps your judgment has been compromised. Dravek's hologram circled her slowly. Our surveillance indicates you've been spending considerable time with one particular human male. A cold dread settled in her stomach. They were watching her. Of course they were. I have infiltrated his confidence to gain information, she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. He creates cultural propaganda about alien species. His knowledge is tactically valuable. Is that why you revealed your true form to him? For tactical advantage? Dravek's voice dripped with disdain. Is that why you allowed intimate contact with this inferior being? The memory of Julian's fingers tracing the bioluminescent patterns on her skin, his lips against hers in the moonlight, flashed through her mind. Those moments had been anything but tactical. You forget yourself, Commander, she said coldly, summoning every ounce of royal authority. I answer to the Emperor, not to you. And the Emperor has sent me with new orders. A cruel smile spread across Dravek's face. You will eliminate this human distraction and complete your mission, or we will deploy the planetary incinerators upon arrival. No colonization. No conquest. Just ash. The hologram flickered out before she could respond, leaving her alone with the weight of his words. 18 days until the Armada arrived. Julian's apartment was quiet when she entered with the key he'd given her. She found him asleep at his drafting table, head resting on his arm beside the intricate illustrations he'd been working on day and night. Project Convergence, he called it, a graphic novel depicting a peace treaty between Earth and the Zalvian Empire. A fantasy, but one he poured his heart into, believing that sharing her story might somehow make a difference. Illyria gentled her features back into human form before touching his shoulder. Julian. He startled awake, blinking up at her through bleary eyes that quickly focused with concern. What's wrong? You're pale. They know about us, she said simply. The invasion force arrives in 18 days, and my commander has ordered me to eliminate you. To her surprise, Julian didn't panic. Instead, he took her hand and pulled her onto his lap, arms encircling her waist. Are you going to? He asked, his eyes searching hers. In 26 years of military training, I've never failed to follow an order, she said, her fingers tracing the stubble along his jaw. Until I met you. Relief washed over his features. He pressed his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out. There must be a way to stop the invasion. There isn't. Her voice broke. If I don't complete my mission, they'll deploy planetary incinerators. They won't colonize Earth, they'll destroy it. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb brushing circles against her hip. Then we have to convince them humanity is worth more alive than dead. How? The Zalvian Empire has conquered 12 systems. They don't negotiate. Maybe they've never had a reason to. He gently turned her face to look at the illustrations spread across his table. You changed, Illyria. You saw something in humanity, in me, worth protecting. Maybe others of your kind could too. She followed his gaze to the artwork. The final panel showed human and Zalvian hands clasped together beneath twin suns. My father would never accept peace. The Emperor believes conquest is the only path to glory. What do you believe? Julian asked softly. You're fourth in line to the throne. What kind of ruler would you be? The question struck her like a physical blow. She had never contemplated ruling, only serving. But Julian's words planted a seed of possibility she couldn't ignore. There is one option. She stood abruptly, pacing the small apartment. A royal challenge. If I invoke ancient law, I can challenge my father's decree before the High Council. Like a duel? A trial of leadership. But I would need evidence that humanity deserves preservation. She turned to him, hope and fear battling within her. Julian, I need to show them what I've seen. What I've felt. Understanding dawned in his eyes. A mind link? Like you explained before? She nodded. But deeper than I've shared with you. I would need to capture the essence of humanity, of connection, emotion, creativity, everything that makes your species unique. And what happens to you if you lose this challenge? He asked, rising to stand before her. Execution, most likely, she answered truthfully. The penalty for treason is death. Julian's face paled, but his voice remained steady. Then we better make sure you win. He pulled her close, one hand cradling the back of her head. Take what you need. Show them everything. Illyria hesitated, her hands trembling as she placed them on either side of his face. This will be intense. I'll experience your memories, your feelings. I trust you, he whispered, leaning into her touch. As her fingers found the neural connection points at his temples, Illyria made her choice. Not for duty. Not for honor. But for love, a concept her people had dismissed as weakness, but which she now recognized as the greatest strength of all. The connection blazed between them, Julian's consciousness flowing into hers like a river breaking through a dam. Joy, pain, hope, fear, the full spectrum of human emotion washed through her, overwhelming in its intensity. And beneath it all, his love for her, pure and unconditional, accepting her entirely, alien nature and all. When she finally broke the connection, tears streamed down her face, another human response she'd once considered a flaw but now embraced. Will it be enough? Julian asked, wiping her tears away with his thumb. Illyria looked into the eyes of the human who had changed everything for her. It has to be. 17 days until the Armada arrived. 17 days to change the destiny of 2 worlds. The Imperial flagship Dominator eclipsed the moon as it entered Earth's orbit, its massive hull gleaming like obsidian against the void of space. Behind it, the Zalvian Armada assembled, 200 warships poised to begin the invasion. In the throne room of the flagship, Emperor Virac sat upon his crystalline seat of power, his 7-fingered hand tapping impatiently against the armrest. The royal court and military high command stood in formation before him, awaiting the arrival of the princess who had inexplicably demanded an audience under the ancient rite of challenge. This is unprecedented, Your Majesty, Supreme Commander Dravik muttered. Princess Illyria was the most disciplined of your children. For her to invoke the right of sovereign challenge. Silence, the Emperor commanded. She will explain herself, or she will face the consequences. The massive doors to the throne room parted. Princess Illyria strode in, no longer disguised in human form. Her azure skin glowed with its natural bioluminescence, her royal insignia pulsing along her arms. But what caused murmurs among the court was the human male walking beside her, matching her stride for stride, his spine straight and shoulders back despite being surrounded by those who saw his kind as prey. Father, Illyria addressed the Emperor with a formal bow. I have invoked the right of sovereign challenge to present evidence that Earth should be granted protected status rather than conquered. Emperor Virax's eyes narrowed. You would defy generations of imperial doctrine for these primitives? I would revise imperial doctrine based on new intelligence, she countered. As is my right as royal blood and your designated scout. The Emperor studied his daughter carefully. Something had changed in her, a certainty that hadn't been there before, a fire that had replaced the cold calculation he had so carefully instilled. You bring a human into the sacred imperial throne room, he observed, his gaze shifting to Julian. Is this your evidence, daughter? A specimen? Julian met the Emperor's stare without flinching. I'm not a specimen. I'm her partner. Gasps and hisses swept through the court. Commander Dravik's hand moved to his disruptor, but a sharp gesture from the Emperor stopped him. "Partner?" Virax's voice was dangerously soft. "You claim equality with Zalvian royalty, human?" "I claim nothing," Julian replied evenly. "But Illyria and I have something your empire has forgotten exists." The Emperor's laughter was cold. "And what might that be?" "Connection," Illyria interjected. "True connection, beyond utility, beyond conquest." She stepped forward, her voice ringing through the chamber. "I challenge your decree of invasion on the grounds that humanity represents a unique evolution that would benefit the Empire more as allies than as subjects." "Pretty words," Dravik sneered. "But the right of challenge requires evidence." Illyria nodded. "Which I am prepared to present." She turned to the Emperor. "Father, I request the collective consciousness chamber." The court fell silent. The chamber was reserved for the most serious imperial decisions, a sacred space where the neural patterns of one could be experienced by many. After a long pause, the Emperor rose. "Very well. The royal court will convene in the chamber. If your evidence fails to persuade, Princess Illyria, both you and this human will be executed for treason before we begin the invasion." Julian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. They had expected this. They had prepared. The collective consciousness chamber was a vast spherical room with crystalline nodes extending from the walls, ceiling, and floor. The royal court arranged themselves at the neural connection stations while Illyria and Julian were positioned at the center. "What happens now?" Julian whispered. "I will share what I gathered from our connection," she explained softly. "But amplified, filtered through my consciousness to highlight what matters most. They will feel what I felt when I understood humanity's worth." Emperor Virax took his position at the primary node. "Begin the merge." Illyria placed her hands on the central crystal. It pulsed with energy, connecting her mind to the consciousness of everyone in the chamber. She closed her eyes, focusing on the memories and emotions she had collected from Julian and her time on Earth. The chamber hummed with power as images began to flow from her mind to theirs. A child's laughter as she chased butterflies in a meadow. The breathtaking beauty of a mountain sunrise. Artists pouring their souls into creation without promise of reward. Scientists working tirelessly to cure diseases that didn't affect them personally. Strangers rushing into burning buildings to save people they'd never met. Julian's face as he looked at Illyria's true form for the first time, not with fear, but with wonder. More than images, she shared the emotions, the fierce joy of creation, the ache of compassion, the warm security of belonging, the exhilarating freedom of choice, and finally, the transformative power of love, not as weakness, but as the ultimate strength that gave meaning to existence. Throughout the chamber, Zalvian faces registered shock, confusion, and for some, growing understanding. The Emperor himself sat rigid, his expression unreadable as the experiences washed over him. When the connection finally faded, silence fell over the chamber. Illyria stood tall, her hand finding Julian's. "This is what we would destroy, Father. Not just a planet of resources, but a civilization that has mastered something we have forgotten. They feel deeply. They create endlessly. They connect profoundly. Emotional indulgence is inefficient," Commander Dravik argued, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. The Empire requires evolution," Illyria interrupted. "We have conquered 12 systems, yet we are stagnant. Our art, our science, our society, all frozen in conquest without purpose." She turned to the court. "I have lived among humans. I have experienced their culture. I propose an alliance instead of conquest, a true exchange of knowledge, technology, and culture that would benefit both worlds." "And if we refuse?" the Emperor asked quietly. Illyria met her father's gaze. "Then you sacrifice the future of the Zalvian people for the past. The universe is vast, Father. Conquest is not the only path to greatness. The court erupted in conflicting voices. The emperor raised his hand, silencing them instantly. "You were always the most strategic of my children, Illyria," he said, studying her with new eyes. "Perhaps I failed to recognize that seeing alternatives is the highest form of strategy." He rose from his seat. "I will consider your proposal. The invasion is suspended pending deliberation." Relief flooded through her, so powerful she nearly staggered. Julian steadied her with a hand at her waist. "Thank you, father," she said, bowing deeply. As the court dispersed, the emperor approached them. He towered over Julian, regarding the human with curious intensity. "You have influenced my daughter greatly, human." Julian straightened. "We've influenced each other. That's what happens when you see someone for who they truly are." A faint smile touched the emperor's lips. "Perhaps there is something to learn from your kind after all." He turned to Illyria. "You will remain as our ambassador to Earth, negotiating terms for this alliance you propose." "It would be my honor," she replied. As the emperor departed, Illyria turned to Julian, hardly daring to believe they had succeeded. "Did that just happen?" Julian asked, a stunned smile spreading across his face. "It appears you were right," she said, letting her formal posture relax at last. "They just needed a reason to see humanity differently." Julian pulled her close, unconcerned with the few court members still watching them. "So, Ambassador Illyria, what happens now?" She traced the contours of his face, memorizing them anew. "Now we build a bridge between worlds. Together." "I like the sound of that," he murmured, his lips finding hers. As they kissed beneath the stars of her world and within sight of his, Illyria understood that the true conquest had not been of planets or people, but of the barriers between them, the fear of difference, the comfort of isolation, the illusion of superiority. In its place stood something far greater, possibility. The possibility of two civilizations growing stronger together than they ever could alone. The possibility that love, across species, across galaxies, might be the most powerful force in the universe after all. And for a princess who had once believed sentiment to be weakness, this new frontier was the greatest adventure of all.